1977 with residential and commercial work.
Good evening, friends. Welcome to another episode of Wayback Wednesday. I'm Randy Adcock. So glad you could be with us tonight. If you remember from last week's show, we ended the show on a bit of a mystery, or I guess a question is a better way to say it, not so much a mystery. But we're talking about J.D. Winstead of Auto Equip and Ben Winstead, who ran Rosa Winstead Auto Parts for a number of years. And the question came up about were they related. And as I mentioned last week, I seem to recall hearing from someone way many years ago that they were related. I don't remember who told me that, and I'm not sure how accurate that was. So after last week's show, I set out to try to find an answer to that question. Were J.D. Winstead and Ben Winstead related? And the only thing I can say definitively about the relation between J.D. Winstead and Ben Winstead is that they maybe were related. I'd even go so far as to say they were likely related, but I could not find any definitive link, and I'll explain more about that as we go through the show tonight. I did find some interesting things, though, when I was going through. Part of what I do when I'm trying to make these kind of connections is go back and look at things like obituaries, because quite often it'll list the parents of the deceased. I look at things like weddings. A wedding announcement will sometimes list the mother and the father of both the bride and the groom. And of course, the newspapers.com website, my old standby when I want to go find out something about a particular individual or a business. I spent literally hours this week perusing through old website pages, newspaper articles, and pictures. And as I said, I could not find a definitive link, but I found some interesting I want to share with you. Number one, there's a lot of parallels between J.D. Winstead's life and Ben Winstead's life. For one, just to give one example, they both were seniors and they both had a son by the same name. J.D. Winstead's son was, of course, J.D. went by J.D. His name was actually Jordan David Winstead, but he went by J.D. His son, Jordan David Winstead Jr., actually went by Jordan. Ben Winstead was actually himself a junior, his father, of course, being Ben Winstead Sr., and he had a son who was Ben Winstead III. So that lineage carried on over the years with quite a few family members. And I saw some relatives, I saw some members of both families with identical names, Benjamin Earl Winstead being one. When I traced the family tree of J.D. Winstead and traced the family tree of Benjamin Earl Winstead, there was a Benjamin Earl Winstead, at least one anyway, in both family trees. They were not the same individual. So I'm guessing perhaps it was a son named after an uncle or a grandfather or something like that. I did go back a couple of 3 generations and found some interesting things about both families. But we're going to start off tonight with an article that appeared in the Nashville Graphic in 1919. And it is actually the story of a murder that took place. And when I started reading this article, it was a rather long, I'm not going to try to read the whole thing tonight, but it was a murder that took place. And if I'm not mistaken, and like I said, I did quite a bit of research trying to tie all this together, but I believe this was J.D. Winstead's father who was murdered. So without any further ado, let's put up item number 1. This is actually the article that appeared in the Nashville Graphic, May the 22nd, 1919. Now keep in mind, J.D. Winstead was born in 1890. He died in 1984. His father, best I can tell from the research that I have done, his father was a man named Napoleon Bonaparte Winstead. And he was born in 1859 and died in 1925. And so as it turns out, here we go. This is the actual article, and this was just, it was so long I had to cut it literally into 4 sections to save it. I saved the entire article for my records for future reference to go back on and just look at. But I'm going to read this first part here because this is the gist of the story. And what it says is serious tragedy in Rocky Mount Township, of course. Rocky Mount Township in the vicinity of Sandy Cross was the scene of a homicide and general shooting scrap early Wednesday morning in which N.B. Winstead was killed and J.W. Wells Jr. had a miraculous escape from death as a result of gunshot wounds and other injuries received in the mix-up in which N.B. Winstead, several of his sons, and J.W. Wells Jr. and his brother H.W. Wells were the participants. From what can be learned of the affair, it seems to have been the culmination of a raiding of a blind tiger some nights ago by revenue officers. Now, let me stop right here. When I saw the phrase blind tiger, I literally had no idea what they were talking about. I said, what in the world are you referring to, a blind tiger? My first thought was maybe some kind of circus event coming to town and a tiger had escaped or whatever. I was not familiar with that phrase. So I did a Google search, and lo and behold, the phrase blind tiger was in reference to what was commonly called a speakeasy. It was an illegal joint that sold liquor, shots of liquor, bottles of liquor, whatever. And quite often there was an animal out front or replica, a carving or something of an animal to kind of throw off the public as to what was going on inside, unless you were amongst those that knew. And the phrase was actually a blind tiger. So apparently the revenue officers had got wind of this blind tiger. They raided it, and the article goes on to say, on Monday night of this week, N.B. Winstead, Turner Boykin, and Bud Rose went to the home of J.W. Wells Jr. and called him out. Wells went to his door in his night clothes and was there confronted by the 3 men who accused Wells of either giving information which led to the destruction of the steel or had assisted in its destruction. Wells denied having any knowledge of the matter or even knowing of the destruction of the steel. Winstead, Boykin, and Rose, it said, assaulted Wells, striking him a blow over the left eye with a filled Pepsi-Cola bottle and otherwise beating him up. And it goes on to say the men left. Let's see here, where are we at? Let me go on here. Early Wednesday morning, J.W. Wells Jr. and his brother H.W. Wells were on their way to Wilson riding on a truck. When in front of the home of N.B. Winstead, they were set upon by Winstead and his sons, who it is alleged were armed for trouble. J.W. Wells Jr. was dragged from the truck, and Winstead and his sons were giving him a severe beating when H.W. Wells came to the rescue with the pistol he had lying on the seat of the truck. In the mix-up of blows and shots fired, N.B. Winstead was killed, while J.W. Wells Jr. received a load of buckshot in his back and hit from a gun fired by one of Winstead's sons. So this whole thing came about apparently because of some information that was apparently, at least allegedly, given to revenue officers who raided the steel, destroyed the steel. And so in the affray that took place, Napoleon Bonaparte Winstead, who was J.D. Winstead's father, was killed. And so the J.W. Wells, being shot, survived his attack, if you want to call it that. And but in any case, that was, I kind of had to put these family lines together by a process of several different things. And just to give you, for example, I found when Ben Winstead got married, his wedding announcement listed his father as being a man by the name of Alonzo. Joseph Alonzo Winstead was Ben Winstead Sr.'s father. Because keep in mind, it was a Ben Winstead Sr., a junior, and now a third for that matter. Jordan David Winstead, or J.D. Winstead as he came to be known, I saw a reference to him amongst a listing of 10 siblings. And these were 10 siblings who all share the father by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte Winstead. And I even was able to find the father of Napoleon Bonaparte was a man named Edwin Winstead, who was born in 1831, died in 1919. Ironically, the same year that this man's son, because he died before his son was killed, he died in February of 1919. His son would have been killed 2 months later in May of 1919. But anyway, that was kind of the gist of how we came to get that. So anyway, I started digging to see what I could find about J.D. Winston, of course, and about Ben Winston, to see if maybe somewhere in an article I could tie the two together. And so when I started doing the research and looking at web pages and looking at newspaper articles and so forth, I came across a bunch of photographs, obviously, and we're going to share some of those with you here momentarily, and a bunch of newspaper ads and a few articles. And so together, everything that I put together seems to suggest that they both were from the same general area, the Sharpsburg, Elm City, Sandy Cross area. And that's if you know anything about that area, there's a bunch of Winstons all out that way. And so, like I said, it's probably certainly possible, and I would say even likely that they were related in some way, if not second or third cousins, maybe somewhere down the line. But as I said, I found some neat pictures. Let's go ahead and put up item number 2. In 1931, this picture appeared in the Rocky Mount Herald, and that is J.D. Winston there outside of his airplane. And you see behind him there on the wall is a sign that says the Auto Equip. J.D. started Auto Equip in 1922. This picture was taken in 1931. But in 1922, J.D. Winston started Auto Equip. A couple things about J.D. that I was not aware of. Before the Rocky Mount Municipal Airport became the airport, J.D. Winston was leasing the land from a farmer that would eventually become the Rocky Mount Municipal Airport. And when Rocky Mount decided that they wanted an airport, they approached J.D. and said, look, we'd like to try to buy the land that this airport is currently on. Would you be willing to back away from your lease to allow the city to buy the land from the man who owns the land? And J.D. graciously agreed to do so. But before that happened, he had staged a couple of air shows out there. He had brought in stunt pilots and barnstormers, and he had worked the land to make it suitable to land and take off airplanes from. So he had put an awful lot of effort into making that property out there an airport long before it ever became an airport. As I said, this picture was taken in 1931, and it didn't become officially the Rocky Mount Airport until 1935. So for a period of 3 or 4 years, if not longer, J.D. Winston was flying in and out of the airport that we later became known as Rocky Mount Municipal Airport. Okay, let's move on in. Item number 3, this ad appeared in the Rocky Mount Herald, June 28, 1935. And you see it says, to garage and filling station dealers, the Auto Equip Company of Rocky Mount is equipped to take care of your motor rebuilding requirements, such as pistons, piston pins, rings, connecting rods, cylinder boring, brake drum turning, flywheel bands, including large stock replacement parts and equipment. In addition to being a wholesale or retail, I should say, parts store, automotive parts store, J.D. Winston envisioned and in fact brought to fruition a very well-equipped machine shop. The Auto Equip retail store was down on Washington Street, at 115 Washington Street. At the other end of Washington Street, down by Bassett Street there, was the machine shop. And that's where they rebuilt motors, they ground heads, they did everything that was involved. And it was a good decision, in fact, because both locations stayed busy for many, many years. Going back just a minute, I mentioned that J.D. was very instrumental in getting the Rocky Mount Airport going. So much so that a lot of people around Rocky Mount became just accustomed to J.D. Winston being involved with airplanes and the airport and so forth. I saw one reference to him being referred to as the granddaddy of aviation at Rocky Mount. So when the Rocky Mount Airport officially became launched, if you will, in 1935, everyone expected J.D. Winston would be recognized in some way, given a seat in a podium stand, or be a guest speaker, or something that would, give him some credit for his efforts in getting not only aviation developed and up and going here in Rocky Mount, but being very much instrumental in getting an airport here. And so when they had the presentation, the grand opening, whatever you want to call it, of the Rocky Mount Municipal Airport, not only did J.D., he was not invited, he did not participate, he did not have anything to do with it, and I'm not sure at this point whether that was his choice or not. I don't want to to misspeak here. It's entirely possible that he was approached and said, no, thank you, I've done my part, you guys take it and run with it. But regardless of whether or not it was his choice or not, there were a lot of people that were upset that he was not there, that he didn't get referenced or mentioned or given some credit for it. Item number 4, if you would, Lee. The Rocky Mount Herald newspaper, June the 28th, 1935, came out this article. I know you can't read on your screen. I'm not going to try to read. It's a very long article, but the gist of this article, I'll just kind of paraphrase here. It says, it was talking about the affair that took place when the Rocky Mount Airport officially became the airport. And it was just after the Gallopade event had taken place that summer. And this says the Gallopade has passed and went off into fine shape, barring the tragic accident to young Milton Robbins. I'm not sure what happened to Mr. Young Milton Robbins, but apparently he got hurt during the Gallopade. All our hearts mourn his, apparently he got killed. All our hearts mourn his loss, and his mother, brother, and sisters of our deepest sympathy. Then it goes on to say, the airport was formally opened with many visitors and dignitaries present. But the performance reminds us of a staging of the Shakespearean play of Hamlet without the Prince of Denmark being present. J.D. Winston of Rocky Mount has been the leading spirit both financially and in interest in aviation in our city since flying became popular, and but for his interest, we do not believe Rocky Mount would have an airport today. He rented the present field and operated it for several years by private enterprise. He staged 2 big air meets at his own expense and trouble, and as a result brought to the city ships from many sections of the country and thousands of visitors. When, through his efforts, the city became interested in building an airport, he was willing to forego his lease so that the city might purchase his property. There had been an effort on the part of some of our city to try to unload on the city a piece of property at an enormous figure, which was opposed by conservative citizens of Rocky Mount. When the land was bought at a reasonable figure, we have been somewhat at a loss to know where the enormous sum of $140,000 was spent on the property, because there is no addition to the property to save except the hangar, which we're told cost $6,000. So the gist of this story is, and I'm not going to, like I said, it's a very long article, but the gist of it was that there was this big grand to-do about the grand opening of the Rocky Mount Municipal Airport, and J.D. Winston was nowhere to be found. He was not a speaker. He was not sitting on the bleachers as a guest. He was not mentioned, and it upset a lot of people. I guess, like I said, it very well could have been that he chose not to participate for whatever reason, but it was a lot of people that were terribly upset that he was not at least mentioned or given some credit for his efforts in bringing the aviation community and indeed the airport itself to Rocky Mount. I'll tell you what, Lee, let's go ahead, bring it back to me. This is a good time for our next commercial break. I mentioned that both J.D. Winston and Ben Winston, there's a lot of parallels in their lives. They were both entrepreneurs, certainly. They both were in the automotive parts business. They both had very long, successful careers. And so there was a lot of information out there about both men, and particularly both businesses. One thing I found interesting was that in the case, anyway, of Ben Winston, his wife, and I mean no disrespect at all what I'm about to say, his wife was a bit of a socialite, and I've used that phrase before, and I mean it sincerely, as a description of someone who is very active in local clubs and local interests and so forth, things like the Junior Guild and the Women's Auxiliary Clubs, and quite often when articles were written about these ladies, they were referenced by their husband's initials. So it was Mrs. Ben Winston or Mrs. J.D. Winston or whatever. And so when I was looking for information about Ben Winston particularly, I saw hundreds, if not thousands, of articles and references to Mrs. Ben Winston. And so that made it difficult to try to find as much about him as I was able to find about J.D. Winston. But when we come back from the break, we'll get in a little more of that. I'll show you some more articles and pictures, and we'll talk a bit more. We'll, of course, take your calls. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday. Take it away, Lee.
Today, having the right healthcare plan tailored to your specific needs is vital to your peace of mind. The question is not if you will need the coverage, but when. And when that time comes, you want to be prepared. With the rising cost of medication, medical procedures, and doctor visits, you should know which is the right insurance plan for you. From life insurance, affordable health care, to Medicare, There are a lot of insurance options available and choosing a plan can be overwhelming. Having Gus Tullis as your insurance professional on your side will give you peace of mind, because you will know you are covered with the insurance that meets your needs.
Hello, my name is Gus Tullis of Gus Tullis Insurance, and I've been helping people with their insurance needs for well over 20 years. Call me today. I'll answer any question you have. 252-937-6913. Looking forward to hearing from you.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service, we offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family, and we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
There's a main nerve that leaves your back that goes into your hip and goes down your leg. It's called the sciatic nerve. A back injury can put pressure on that nerve, causing pain, numbness, tingling. Chiropractors can actually help that. At the Hammer Chiropractic Center on Sunset, we know exactly what to do. We have very good relationships with the doctors in Rocky Mount. We'd like to co-manage people's care. Some medications may help us do our jobs, and our jobs may help their medications work better.
If you or your loved one is living with hearing loss, and if you haven't found a solution that fits your lifestyle, then you should consult with the local experts at the new Hearing Aid Urgent Care in Nashville, North Carolina. Hearing Aid Urgent Care is a place to go for over-the-counter hearing solutions that will improve your daily life and communication between your loved ones and you. Purchasing in our store does not require any prescription or medical recommendation. Our team of experts does recommend a hearing examination so we can help you purchase the correct product for your personal needs. We hold regular listen and learn events so you can ask questions and work with the high-quality products from our vendors to find out what hearing device will best suit you before you buy. Open Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And you can call 252-459-4008 to find out more information. Hearing Aid Urgent Care located at 102 West Nashville Drive in Nashville, North Carolina.
And we're back. Something I forgot to mention at the top of the show, and I wanted to make a point of doing that. I got a text during the break from Randy Harrell, one of our viewers who's watching us from Nashville, Tennessee, I believe it is. I almost said Memphis, but I think it is Nashville. And I know we've got viewers elsewhere in the country who watch over the internet. Last week, due to a technical difficulty, we were unable to broadcast over the internet. So if you were watching us over cable TV or even over the airwaves with an antenna, you were able to watch the show. But if you were trying to get to us from the internet, you couldn't get the show last week. That issue has since been resolved, and so I'd like to welcome those viewers back to join us tonight. And if you know someone who was in the past trying to watch from the internet and was unable to do so, call them and let them know we're back on the air live over the internet, www.whigtv.com. And we are live every Wednesday night from 8 to 9. The show replays every Saturday and Sunday. I'm not exactly sure of the time. I think it's like 3 to 4 on Saturday and 4 to 5 on Sunday, but the show replays twice on the weekend. So if you miss a show on Wednesday night, you can always tune back in. And of course, we also are on YouTube. All our shows are taped and sent up, uploaded to YouTube, and so you can go back and pull past episodes of Wayback Wednesday and other WHIG programming on YouTube. So check us out. All right, so let's move on then, Lee. Item number 5. As I said, it was fairly easy to find articles and information about J.D. Winstead and Auto Equip, and I had to literally pick and choose what to bring in tonight because there was just so much out there. This article caught my eye for a couple of reasons I'll share with you. Number one, this appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram November the 30th of 1937. And you see the headline reads, "Basement fire starts among bows and paper." I think that's supposed to be boxes. It's a misprint, obviously, because the first line says, "Packing boxes and paper were the sources of a basement fire yesterday in the Auto Equip company." Down at the bottom it says 33 firemen answered the alarm and extinguished the blaze before much damage resulted, Fire Chief J.R. Sorsby said. Now, if that name rings a bell to you, it should, because we've talked about his father in a past show a couple of months back. J.R. Sorsby was the gentleman who was I use the phrase, a man's man. He led camping expedition, if you will, with a bunch of local people, primarily men. He had a hardware store. There's Sorsby Alley, 1 block off of Main Street downtown, named after Mr. J.R. Sorsby. But his son was the fire chief. And so in 1937, when this fire broke out in the basement of Auto Equip, amongst those boxes and paper and so forth, 33 firemen responded, and their fire chief at that time was Chief J.R. Sorsby, who was J.R. Sorsby Sr.'s son, of course. Okay, let's move on then, Lee. Item number 6, if you will. And I'm going to bounce back and forth here a bit because as I said earlier, there were so many parallels between J.D. Winston and Ben Winston, and my intention at first was, okay, we'll talk about J.D. Winston, then we'll switch over and talk about Ben Winston. But what I found was that there were articles appearing sometimes in the same month about either both men or both businesses. So there may be 2 or 3 in a row about J.D., maybe 2 or 3 in a row about Ben, but I'm going to kind of keep that the theme going through tonight's show. May 17, 1938, this article appeared talking about J.D. And it's a rather long article, but the gist of it is, and I'll read a little bit of it here for you. It says, 4 planes piloted by local aviators will carry airmail from Rocky Mount May 19th as a part of the National Airmail Week program. 1 plane will pick up mail here during Norfolk to Knoxville flight, and 3 planes flown by local pilots will fly mail routes through different sections of eastern North Carolina, all 3 routes ending in Raleigh. 2 planes will bring mail to Rocky Mount from Plymouth and Elizabeth City. William C. Olson of Raleigh, consulting engineer for the Rocky Mount City Power Plant and experienced amateur aviator, is scheduled to land in Rocky Mount May 19th as 1 stop on an airmail route from Norfolk, Virginia to Knoxville, Tennessee. And it goes on to talk about some of the other pilots. J.D. Winston, veteran local pilot, will fly an airmail route from Rocky Mount to Raleigh May 19th by way of Wilson, Farmville, Greenville, Goldsboro, Selma. So again, J.D. was not just an amateur pilot. He was very active in several aspects of aviation, including the Civil Air Patrol. We'll get to that in a moment, but he volunteered quite frequently to participate in these types of events. It doesn't say here that he was paid. My guess is he probably was not. But it was any opportunity to promote flying and aviation and the flying world. He seemed to be readily willing and able to participate in. Okay, Lee, let's move on then. Item number 7. This article caught my attention. This is one that's about Ben Winston. And if you remember, Rawls and Winston Auto Parts has been a staple in the auto parts industry, not only in Rocky Mount. There was 2 or 3 around. There was one in Nashville, for example, for a number of years. I think there was one down in Goldsboro, a couple others around the state, this part of the state. But Rawls and Winston was the name that I always heard it referred to, never just Winston Auto Parts. It was always Rawls and Winston. And I often wondered, well, what become of Mr. Rawls? Well, in March 24th, 1937, this little notice of dissolution of partnership article appeared in the paper, in the Rocky Mount Telegram, and I'll read it. It says, public notice is hereby given that the partnership heretofore owned and operated by Fitzhugh L. Rawls and B. Earl Winston, under the firm name of Rawls and Winston, has this day been dissolved, and all of the assets have been purchased by B. Earl Winston, who has become responsible for all the debts and liabilities of the firm and entitled to all the assets, claims, and interests of it. Fitzhugh L. Rawls is no longer in any manner connected with said firm and is in no wise hereafter responsible for any of its debts. I think that's going to be no ways hereafter. But anyway, this 10th day of February 1937, B. Earl Winston, trading as Rawls and Winston. So from 1937 on, Rawls and Winston was owned and operated by a member of the Winston family, primarily Ben Winston. And I've never heard anybody mention Mr. Rawls And until I saw this article, I never really gave it much thought. I just assumed there wasn't a Mr. Rawls somewhere in the background, and indeed there was in the very early beginnings of the business. But in 1937, that partnership was dissolved, and Ben Winstead took over the business entirely. Now, I said earlier that Ben Winstead started the business in 1922, I believe it was, but he passed away and his son took over. And we'll get to that in a few minutes too. But before we do, let's go ahead and lead item number 8. October 17, 1939, this newspaper article, this ad appeared in the paper. And, you know, we've talked in the past about how it was quite often a big deal when a new business would get started or would have an anniversary. In this case, this is a congratulatory ad from Rawls and Winstead Auto Parts to Ray Bandy on their 3rd anniversary as a dealer in Rocky Mount. And, you know, this is something that you just don't see anymore. But on the same page with this ad, there were, golly, at least a half a dozen, if not more, different local companies who had, I'm guessing, paid for an ad. I'm sure they weren't free. They'd paid for an ad to congratulate Mr. Ray Bandy on his 3rd anniversary as a Plymouth DeSoto dealer in Rocky Mount. And so I saw this and I thought, you know, it's really neat that these types of businesses did this for each other. They participated in these advertising campaigns to promote one another. And it wasn't just, you know, it didn't really matter what kind of business it was. I guess the best way to say what I'm trying to say, because in a later ad, I saw a very similar congratulatory ad where I think it was J.D. Winstead Auto Equip was congratulating Rawls and Winstead. So these types of ads appeared with some frequency in the 30s, 40s, even into the 50s, and then it just kind of fizzled out of popularity, and you just don't see this anymore. Okay, let's move on then. Item number 9, the Rocky Mount Telegram. This article appeared May 25th, 1942, and it's talking about, I mentioned earlier that there was a junior and a senior Ben Winstead. Lee, if we could, item number, there we go. This is actually Ben Jr. As I said, his father, Ben Sr., started Rawls and Winstead in 1922 with his partner. But in 1942, sadly, the senior Winstead passed away, and his son took over. But before his son took over, this article appeared. It says, in fact, this was before his father died. Ben Winstead Jr., son of Mr. and Mrs. B.E. Winstead of 427 East Thomas Street, has been named one of 32 delegates from NC State College to attend the Southern Student Christian Conference at Blue Ridge. So at this point, Ben Winstead Jr. was at State College. He was still a student. He was still living at home. I saw a reference in the 1942 Rocky Mount City Directory that listed Mr. B.E. Winstead at this address and his son as being student. And so, as I said, this was in May 25th, in fact, of 1942. Just a couple of months later, sadly, June 1st, 1942, Ben's father, Ben Winstead Sr., passed away. Now, this is the obituary. It says, B.E. Winstead, 43, owner and operator of a wholesale and retail automobile parts business here for the last 20 years, died at his home early this afternoon after brief illness. Funeral will be conducted at the home at 5 o'clock Monday by Dr. J.W. Kinchelow, pastor of the First Baptist Church. Interment will take place in Pineview Cemetery. Mr. Winstead was well known throughout Eastern North Carolina. His firm is known as Rawls and Winstead Company. Born in Nash County near Sharpsburg, Mr. Winstead was the son of Mr. and Mrs. Alonzo Winstead, now of Rocky Mount. Survivors include one widow, Mrs. Nell Robbins Winstead, his parents, one son, B.E. Winstead. Let's see here, he was a student at State College. Two brothers, Cecil Winstead of Portsmouth and Billy Winstead of Asheville, and one sister, Mrs. C.C. Daughtridge. So again, Ben Winstead Sr., and I think he went by Earl. I saw a couple of references to him as being B. Earl Winstead. But in 1942, after a brief illness, the father passed away, And at that point, his son, as I said, was still a student at NC State. And so there was a bit of a period of time there where between Ben Jr. being at school and the time his father had passed away, I'm guessing his wife, I think her name was Nell, Nell Robin Winstead, must have been kind of at least heading things up. I'm sure there were other people there working too, but she must have been heading things up in between the time that her husband died and the time her son took it over. Okay, number 11, Lee, August the 2nd, 1944, 2 years later, Ben Jr. got married. And this, I said earlier that I quite often will look for wedding announcements and obituary announcements because it will often list parents of the bride, parents of the groom, brothers, sisters. It's a good way to kind of make family connections when you're doing this kind of genealogy research. And a couple things, I'm not going to read this whole, it's a fairly long write-up here about the wedding, but it does say the marriage of Miss Peggy Alline Taylor of Winston-Salem and Corporal Benjamin Earl Winstead was solemnized Saturday, July 22nd at the Post Chapel of Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. Miss Taylor is the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Roby Taylor of Winston-Salem. Corporal Winstead is the son of Mrs. B.E. Winstead of this city and the late Mr. Winstead. So this is World War II, obviously now. Ben Jr. has been drafted. And it says Corporal Winstead, a graduate of Rocky Mount High School, attended North Carolina State College, where he was a member of the senior class at the time he was drafted. So I want to say I saw a reference that Ben did serve in World War II, and I forgot, forgive me, I forgot where it was he served, but he was drafted during World War II. He did serve, and then came back and took over the family business and ran it up until his death in 2013, I believe it was. Okay, let's move on to item number 12. And I mentioned we're going to kind of jump back and forth between J.D. and Ben, so bear with me here. This article appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram September 2nd, 1944, literally the very month after Ben Jr. gets married. J.D. Winstead was promoted to major in the local Civil Air Patrol. It says J.D. Winstead, commander of the Group 443 of the Civil Air Patrol, has been promoted from captain to major. It was announced here today. And it goes on to mention a few other people that were promoted as well. It says squadron in areas where poliomyelitis is not prevalent are to resume their regular meetings according to Major Winstead. So, as I said earlier, J.D. was very active not only as a hobby, flying as a hobby, but he was also very active in promoting the sport of flying, the flying lifestyle, if you will. And any opportunity to promote that or be involved with it, he jumped at the chance and was very active in the Civil Air Patrol, obviously. And for many years, he flew quite often, everywhere, all over. Okay, Lee, let's go on to item number 13. July 19th, 1945, this article appeared, or this ad, I should say, appeared. And it was from an advertisement that appeared for Rawls and Winstead. And I draw your attention to two things. Number one, it says for automobile, truck, and tractor equipment, contact J.D. Ryan, not Winstead, J.D. Ryan, at Rawls and Winstead Company at 247 South Washington Street. And we talked last week about, that was something I was not aware of, that Rawls and Winstead had ever been down on South Washington. As many of you may recall, for many, many years, and certainly my earliest recollection of Rawls and Winstead was they were on North Church Street, a couple blocks north of Ray Bandy Dodge. And so anyway, this was where they were in 1945 at 247 South Washington Street. And the other thing I want to point out to you here is, this whole part of the state, eastern North Carolina, is for many, many years been obviously very agricultural minded, for lack of a better term. I know when I worked at Davis Company Auto Parts, we had about as many parts for tractors and farm equipment as we did for cars and trucks. In fact, we carried things that when I first went to work there, I had been working in I went from Chipley Lincoln Mercury in the parts department there to working at Davis Company Auto Parts. And a lot of the things that we had on the shelf at Davis Company I'd never seen before. And when I first went walking to the warehouse and looking at the stock on the shelf, I said, what in the world is all this stuff? And where does it go on a car? And that's when I found out, after talking to people who worked there, that a lot of that stuff was farm equipment parts and pieces for tractors and so forth. And so, but it was a big deal for automotive companies like Rawls and Winstead, Auto Equip, Browning Auto Parts, Motor Barons, Davis and Company, to stock parts for trucks and tractors for the farming community, because it was such a need in the area for those types of products. And I just realized it's time for our next commercial break. So Lee, bring it back to me. We'll take a quick break again, folks. When we come back, we're going to go through some more ads and share some more things with you. I've got some more pictures, and we'll take your calls as always. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday.
Today, having the right healthcare plan tailored to your specific needs is vital to your peace of mind. The question is not if you will need the coverage, but when. And when that time comes, you want to be prepared. With the rising cost of medication, medical procedures, and doctor visits, you should know which is the right insurance plan for you. From life insurance, affordable health care, to Medicare, there are a lot of insurance options available, and choosing a plan can be overwhelming. Having Gus Tullis as your insurance professional on your side will give you peace of mind, because you will know you are covered with the insurance that meets your needs.
Hello, my name is Gus Tullis of Gus Tullis Insurance, and I've been helping people with their insurance needs for well over 20 years. Call me today. I'll answer any question you have. 252-937-6913. Looking forward to hearing from you.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service, we offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family, and we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
There's a main nerve that leaves your back that goes into your hip and goes down your leg. It's called the sciatic nerve. A back injury can put pressure on that nerve, causing pain, numbness, tingling. Chiropractors can actually help that. At the Hammer Chiropractic Center on Sunset, we know exactly what to do. We have very good relationships with the doctors in Rocky Mount. We like to co-manage people's care. Some medications may help us do our jobs, and our jobs may help their medications work better.
If you or your loved one is living with hearing loss, and if you haven't found a solution that fits your lifestyle, then you should consult with the local experts at the new Hearing Aid Urgent Care in Nashville, North Carolina. Hearing Aid Urgent Care is a place to go for over-the-counter hearing solutions that will improve your daily life and communication between your loved ones and you. Purchasing in our store does not require any prescription or medical recommendation. Our team of experts does recommend a hearing examination so we can help you purchase the correct product for your personal needs. We hold regular listen and learn events so you can ask questions and work with the high-quality products from our vendors to find out what hearing device will best suit you before you buy. Open Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And you can call 252-459-4008 to find out more information. Hearing Aid Urgent Care located at 102 West Nashville Drive in Nashville, North Carolina.
And we're back. We are back. Item number 14, leaders. This is just an ad that I found, again, talking about Auto Equip's machine shop over on Bassett Street. It talks about motor rebuilding. This appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram May 4th, 1946. And it says Auto Equip Company owns and operates one of the largest and best equipped motor rebuilding shops in Eastern North Carolina. When motors are rebuilt better, Auto Equip will rebuild them. You know, that's something, I saw a post today, in fact, on Facebook. Guy had I think it was like a 2010, 2011 Chevrolet pickup truck. He took it to a dealer because it had a knock in the motor, whatever. He was told we can rebuild it for $8,000. We'll put a rebuilt motor in it for you for $10,000. And that blew my mind that you could spend $10,000 on a rebuilt motor this day and age. I'm sure J.D. wants to be rolling his grave to find out how much money is being made selling rebuilt motors today. All right, let's move on then. Item number 15, Rocky Mount Telegram, January 29th, 1949. This is just a neat article here. It's a picture of J.D. on the left there with his hand on the prop of the airplane, and Pastor Kinchelow there on the right-hand side of First Baptist Church. And it's a fairly long article. I'm not going to read the article, but what it says is J.D. Winston made a promise to himself and to God that he wanted to be a pilot so bad that if he ever got his pilot's license, he would go to Sunday school every day. And lo and behold, he got his pilot's, I think he soloed in 1927 or thereabouts. And for 25 years when this picture was taken, he had been in Sunday school every day. And so he was awarded with a men's Bible class medal, if you will, for perfect attendance for 25 years of going to Sunday school. And it said it made a reference to a period of time when there was a snow one Sunday morning. And J.D. showed up, and one of the gentlemen showed up at the church, and they were the only two there. And so they held Sunday school between the two of them. But for 25 years, every Sunday, J.D. Winston was in Sunday school. And that's a remarkable course that run there, going to Sunday school and having perfect attendance, 25 years. Okay, sadly, and we talked about this one time before on a previous show, for those that watched, several of you remember, in 1952, there was a terrible, terrible accident. J.D.'s wife sadly was killed in a train car collision. There were some witnesses there. It was sadly, again, they said that she approached a railroad crossing as a train was coming. She stopped. She rolled forward a little bit. She stopped again. She rolled forward again. And unfortunately, when she rolled forward a second time, she was hit by the train and she was killed. And this happened July the 8th, 1952. And this was, of course, the picture of the car. From what I read, she was actually thrown clear of the car and did not survive, obviously. And, you know, I never saw any reference that J.D. ever got remarried. I'm not sure whether he dated anyone or anything else, but I never saw any reference to him being married. And when he died, there was no reference or no mention of a wife or a girlfriend or anyone else either. So from 1952 to 1984, when he died, that 30-some year time span, he remained, I guess, single. Item number 17, Lee. February 23rd, 1955, this picture appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram, and it's a rare gathering of some of the most prominent men in the automotive parts industry throughout the time from 1920s all the way up to the 1970s for sure. Number 17, Lee, can we get that up on the screen for our viewers? Okay. Give us just a minute. A bit of a technical difficulty there in the control room. We're working on it now. But this picture appeared, and it's a group of Rocky Mount Automotive Parts Store owners. And I will give Lee just a minute to pull up on the screen here, and we'll go through them one by one. I knew several of these men. I can't say, there we go. Again, February 23rd, 1955. Here are officials of 6 local auto parts distributors as they met an annual session Tuesday night at Buck Overton's. In the picture from left to right are J.D. Winston, the Auto Equip Company, C.B. Harrison of Browning Auto Parts, G.R. Davis, that's Grady Davis, my old boss, one of them anyway, and J.R. Martin from Davis & Company, H.R. Malcolm from Motor Bearings and Parts, and Ben Winston, Jr. from Rawls and Winston, and lastly on the far right, that's Mr. J.R. Norris from Shaver Battery and Auto Parts. As I said, I knew several of these men and worked directly for Grady Davis. Without a doubt, one of the finest men I've ever known and a great boss for the short time that I worked for him. Okay, Lee, moving on, number 18. J.D. Winston had Auto Equip. They rebuilt motors and stuff. Rawls and Winston, June 15, 1965, they had a brake drum and brake turning machine, and they would turn rotors, brake drums, and so forth for you. This caught my eye for a couple of reasons. Number one, it says proudly announces the promotion of W.A. Billy Donaldson to sales manager. You may recall hearing me tell many times in the show in the past, Billy Donaldson was my uncle. He married my mother's sister, Isabel Donaldson. And so I had forgotten that they offered this service, but quite a few auto parts stores did, in fact, have these types of services where they would turn rotors for you. And when we were at Davis Company, we didn't do that, but we would sometimes, someone had brought in a rotor, we'd have one of our drivers carry it over to Auto Equip or Rawls and Winston and have it turned for our customer, as a courtesy for our customer. But anyway, that was 1965. Billy was promoted to sales manager at Rawls and Winston. Moving on, number 19, Lee, August 6, 1967. This is J.D. Winston outside with airplanes. This was during the Rocky Mount Centennial celebration, of course, 1967. Rocky Mount was 100 years old. And this was J.D. standing out front of his airplane at the old municipal airport on Church Street. Number 20, Lee. I mentioned earlier about congratulatory ads. This is another one. Congratulations to John Van Motors on their 30th anniversary from Rawls and Winston. This was just such a neat idea that these businesses were promoting each other like this, and I was glad to see this. Sad we don't do it anymore, but it was really popular for many years. Number 21, Lee, if we could. I mentioned just a moment ago, Billy was my uncle. In 1969, he left, he had left Rawls and Winston earlier and went to work for Crest Ford as a parts manager there, and left Crest Ford and started Rocky Mount Auto Parts in 1969. And this was his business partner for a short while there, Mr. Ward. But and you see to the right, it says the Auto Equip Company congratulates Rocky Mount Auto Parts on their grand opening. That's something you just wouldn't see today. One business congratulating what it was every measure of the word, a competitor, obviously. But this was pretty commonplace in the 40s, 50s, even into the 60s, obviously, that when a new business would open up, all types of other businesses would congratulate them and place an ad in the paper doing so. Number 22, Lee, Rocky Mount Telegram, November 15, 1970. This was just a neat list of independent garage owners in Rocky Mount. And obviously, some of these names you'll recognize: Joiner's Body Shop, Leon's Body Shop, Moore's Body Shop, and so forth. Then there were mechanical shops like Sykes Garage, Rouse Tune-Up, Hex Foreign Car Service. And then there were what they called allied members: Automotive Interior Distributors, AID, out on 301, Browning Auto Parts, Davis & Company, where I work, Hydes Distributing, Rawls and Winston. I was a little surprised that Auto Equip was not listed here somewhere, and I'm not sure why that was, but somehow they did not participate in this promotion apparently. But I'll tell you what they did do. In 1970, Auto Equip, J.D. Winston and Doodle Barnes got a patent for a motor engine block mount. This is something I never knew, but they designed this thing. Item number 23, if you would, Lee. They designed this, got a patent for it, and my guess is it's probably still in use at similar types of repair shops all over the country. But it's a stand that allows you to put an engine block on it so the block can be turned so you can hone out the individual cylinders and the valves and so valve guides and so forth. But it's in 1970, here we go. It's not a great picture. This just kind of gives you an idea of how it looked. But in the bottom right-hand corner, I know it's hard to see from that image there, it's not a very good picture. But it says Jordan D. Winston, Robert B. Barnes, inventors. And they invented this thing, got a patent for it, and apparently marketed it. Okay, let's move on. We're running out of time here. Number 24. In 1981, this picture appeared, and it's a very old picture. I was kind of surprised to find this, but this was a picture of J.D. Winston back during World War II when he was a patrol leader of the Civil Air Patrol. I mentioned earlier that he had made Major been promoted from captain to major while he was in the Civil Air Patrol. But I didn't find this picture when I saw that article. This picture didn't appear till many years later. But May of 1981, somehow they found this picture in the archive somewhere. It was in the Rocky Mount Telegram archives, and they printed it in the paper. And it says, back during the days of World War II, J.D. Winston was a commanding officer of the large group of men who served in the Rocky Mount Civil Air Patrol. Winston is considered one of the aviation pioneers in this area of eastern North Carolina. Says photo by Bugs Barrington. So Bugs Barrington took this photo back in the days of World War II, somewhere in the 1940s. I think that article I saw earlier was 1944 when he was promoted to major. Okay. I mentioned earlier, too, that J.D. and Ben both had a son by the same name. And sadly, at least in J.D.'s case, he outlived his son. Item number 25, if you would, Lee. April 13, 1984, Jordan D. Winston Jr., which was J.D.'s son, passed away. And this is obituary. He was an accountant, actually. He was 72 when he passed away. And he himself had two sons, David L. Winston of Nashville and Jordan G. Winston of the Home. His father, of course, J.D. Winston Sr. of the Home, and two grandchildren. And this was in April 13th of 1984. Sadly, just a few months later, in August of 1984, J.D. Winston himself passed away. Item number 26, if you would, Lee. And this is the article and the picture that accompanied the article when J.D. himself passed away. J.D. Jordan David Winston, longtime Rocky Mount businessman whose hobby for more than 50 years had been flying, is dead at 94. Death came to the man who long had been acclaimed as Mr. Aviation in Rocky Mount on Monday at a local hospital. He had been in frail health for some time. It goes on to say Winston established his auto equip company in 1922 and remained active in the business until his final illness. Soloing in 1926, Winston obtained a commercial license in 1934. He served as president of the Carolina Aero Club in 1940 and became a major in the Civil Air Patrol. This says 1946. It was actually 1944 when he became a major. But anyway, so on a special run in 1938, Winston flew the air mail route over Wilson to Raleigh. It says here, two grandsons are the lone survivors. They are David L. Winston of Nashville and Jordan G. Winston of Rocky Mount. So he actually apparently never remarried. Okay, number 27, real quickly, Lee. This is an article that appeared. J.D. died in 1984. 5 years later, Auto Equip was sold. And new owners took over, and they were the husband and wife team. Their name is in here somewhere. Dennis and Rosemary Pittman bought the business. And I don't know from whom. I'm guessing some family member, maybe a grandson or whatever. February 12th, 2013, sadly, Benjamin Earl Winston Jr. passed away. Item number 28, Lee, if you would. And this is the obituary for Ben Winston Jr., who I thought was the one who started Rawls and Winston. As I said earlier, it turns out it was his father who started the business. And when his father passed away in 1942, Ben was in NC State College at the time. He had been subsequently drafted into World War II and came back and took over the business and ran it until his death in 2013. Real quickly, these last couple are just pictures of the grave sites of Ben Earl Winston Sr. And the family plot. There you go. That was Ben's father. He died in 1942, you see at age 42, 43. And then this is the family plot that shows the Winston family plot out at Pineview Cemetery in Rocky Mount. And then lastly, J.D.'s obituary. And this is from the findagrave.com website. And you see there, J.D. was born 31 May 1890. He died August 13th, 1984, at age 94 years old. Folks, that's all we got tonight. We've run slam out of time. I want to thank you all for tuning in and hope you learned something tonight. This was a fascinating look back for me. Like I said, I still would love to find a clear and concise answer to the question of were J.D. Winston and Ben Winston related? My gut tells me they were. If you go back far enough in the Bible, we're all related anyway. But anyway, if I find out any more, I'll certainly let you know in future shows. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. Have a great week. Be kind to one another. And we'll see you next week with more Wayback Wednesday. Bye-bye.